Today we're going to talk about barter and trade. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Since 2000, I have not, quote, held a regular job. I'm still here. So the question is it possible to survive or even thrive and not be plugged into the system, i.e., greetings, sisters. Welcome. We just got started. I'm going to tell you all how to live somewhat disconnected from the system, or where we're headed, the underground economy. I have not had a regular job since 2000. I have certainly worked all kinds of wild jobs, manual labor, block work. Like at one time I thought, now I know what it means to be like in the brickyards of Egypt. I mean, doing heavy labor for periods of time. I worked in the factory for a while, for a short period of time. But the last 10 years since I've been in Tennessee, I barter trade. And that's what I want to tell you about, why it's important, how to do it. But just to show you that you can do it, is I live on 5 acres. It's paid for. I drive simple, I live simple, but everything's paid for. And I'm not starving. I got clothes on my back and shoes on my feet. So these are some methods, because I think as we go into the world now, it's like unescapable that things are going to get really challenging. So the question is, how can we operate in this environment or learn to negotiate? Because you look in Earth's history, there's been lots of times where people have gone through a lot of stress, breakdown, nations falling, economic chaos. So can we learn lessons? The answer is yes. So let's go into this. I'm just an individual, so I call it Christian preparedness now, as in it's really time to, act. And I know that the group in Del Rio, Cats With It, they've been working for a while, just to network, and the folks here thinking about, it looks really like things are on a rapid escalation, financial breakdown. People that are not awake, thinking that, I'm going to have a retirement or whatever. I said, no. I liquidated mine. Just for example, I did have some retirement with the institutions. I liquidated mine back when the stock market was, because it was entangled in the stock market. And I was actually at an Adventist institution, and they forced me to take retirement. I said, I don't want it. I don't believe in gambling, because they're invested in mutual funds. And I said, well, some of it's connected to pharmacia. They didn't like that. But I liquidated it back when the stock market was approaching 660 or something. It was a while ago. But this stuff is going to be there. So what can you do to, because I think God has made adequate preparation for us. What can we do? And then what part might God play as we go into this uncertain world? So the title is Underground Economy, How to Adapt, Prepare, and Survive. So here's some thought questions. What are you going to do when you lose your job or your primary source of income? A lot of people, now it's happening to people all the time. That's kind of a crisis in your world, but what are you going to do? You have a plan. You should. How can you produce income as the economy collapses? Is it possible? Absolutely. What did people do in history when their societies collapsed? I mean, we study Daniel 2 and the fall of empires, Babylon, Medo Persia, Rome. I mean, people endured, when Rome collapsed, it was, if you read a lot of secular history on that, it was not a pleasant thing, but people survived it. And what will an underground economy look like? And what I'm going to do is look at some contemporary stuff in our lifetime because it's happened in places around the world. And what can you do to get prepared now? So here's a thought for meditation. Of course, the Bible has the answers. In Revelation 13, 16, 17, of course, it says, he that caused us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, that no man may what? Buy or sell, save he that hath the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, there's a lot of theology packed in there, but we'll just focus on the buying and selling part. Okay, because who's the man, 666 and all that, it's a whole nother subject. But we're going to go to the practical just as the system encroaches upon us, what can we do? So why barter? Barter, as you know, is trading. Okay, I have, when I traveled to South Pacific, I was able to bring this, but this is just a folding knife. It's an EMT knife. You can cut seat belts. You can break. Good knife. I didn't pay a lot of money for it, but they wanted this really bad. So, of course, I traded. And they gave me some handmade woven, pouches I really thought were cool. So I said, well, here, want knife? So we bartered. You got something I want? I just had this one, and this is what was really valuable. I always carry this stuff, but Leatherman. I mean, their eyes popped out. And so I'm like, sure, no problem. I can get more of this stuff. I actually bought these when they were Thanksgiving special, $10 a piece. And they're good quality. I have used them, but I bought a dozen. Same when I went to Africa. I mean, it's like, okay. So I bartered. And so why barter? Well, there's some practical advantages. You avoid taxes and government regulations. But government wants power and they want to regulate and control you. Now, most people that have jobs, you do what? The voluntary withholding, W-4. You've signed off, you're compliant, you got to comply. But is it possible to not sign a W-4? And the answer is absolutely. If I come over and say, Kat, you need some work done, we can do it, and I could build a wall or do construction, and you can say, well, here, you need some ammunition or something. That's what they can't stand, is that they can't get their claws in it and extract something out of you. So whatever your services are, if you can make things, fix things, grow things, heal things, all of that, those are skills. So that's one advantage. Another, avoid detection from the nanny state. Okay, people, wanting to regulate you. Anybody that's in the medical field knows that they got lots of regulations, and they get tighter and tighter. Can you practice medicine outside of that? Yeah, you can. You can save money. I could give you story after story what I find in a flea market. I have bought just things, I know Alice are in vegetarian stuff. 25-pound bag of quinoa. $10. Is that a deal? It doesn't happen all the time, but people bring in stuff, and I tell them, hey, you got any organic stuff? Bring it. Organic bread that costs $5 or whatever at Walmart, Dave's bread or whatever, 6 loaves for $5. I'm like, sure. Am I saving money? Oh yeah. Supplies, especially medical supplies, depends on the flea market, but there's a flea market down south where they get a lot of stuff out of CVS and Walgreens, and they'll have these boxes, with the gauze and the bandage and all that stuff, which is like $5-6 a pack. You know, and it's like, okay, $1 a piece. And I said, what if I take 20 of them or 25, $20? Sure. So I just fill bags full of it. 3 hours. Oh, well, from here, 2.5. But I'm just saying that that's those type of opportunities pop up where you really can make some bargain. You find things you can't find in a conventional store. How about like, you know, a crosscut saw, draw knives, old hand tools, pre-electric. That's what I deal with. Things you can't buy at Walmart. You know, things that they used 100 years ago. People drag them out of barns, take them to the flea market. So that's another thing. You develop skills that will be essential in difficult times. How to negotiate, how to recognize, you know, what's a good deal, how to, you know, those are good skills to have. So what type of things to barter? Now, if you go to YouTube, you'll always see a video, the top 10 things to barter, right? That's almost a joke. I mean, some of it's practical, but inevitably everyone will include two things that I don't recommend: alcohol and tobacco. Because, you know, everybody's addicted. When they don't get their stuff, they're going to like, what, chocolate? Yeah. But why barter in things that are not good for people? Especially alcohol. Do you want to deal with people that are like, no. So I think anything that's practical or useful. My favorite thing, hand tools, also cooking, high quality cookware, high quality knives, not cheap ones, but carbon steel knives, old hickory, canning stuff, pressure cookers, cast iron. That's what I like. I know ladies that do herbal salves and stuff like that. Tools, especially hand or non-electric. Household items of high quality, cooking, canning stuff, food preparation, guns, knives, and ammos. There are men that's their thing. You can either, I mean, I do a little of it because I run into a lot of it. And I believe in that God gave us the right to defend ourselves. And that's one that Christians, it's interesting because I deal with Amish and they're pacifists. Adventists are kind of funny. Some of them don't want to go near it. Other ones will, believe it and defend themselves. I'm like, it's your choice. But it is a big thing now of value. It's a thing that holds value. So you could be antique firearms. So it's a big one we see. Gold and silver in various forms. My preference is coinage, like pre-64 silver. That's 90% silver. It's called junk silver. It's identifiable. It's easily, different sizes, quarters, nickels, and dimes, and people recognize it. I'm not wild about jewelry. But there is silver jewelry. People will buy it and they'll call it for melt value and whatever. But salvage merchandise such as food items, hygiene items like bleach, soap, and we'll see why that's important. And I really recommend avoiding what I call sin items: alcohol, tobacco, videos. What good are videos? Except for instructional ones, but movies. I'm not saying all movies are bad, but for the most part. And related items. Because what you're going to do is draw clients that favor that. And I know people in the flea market and people that are into that. I try to be friends with them and try to encourage them to get away from that stuff. But when things get desperate, and I recognize those people coming up, it's going to be like things are going to be on high alarm or high alert, so it's best to be free. And I think that's the power of the gospel for me. I was a slave to several of those things, and I'm free now. I don't believe that, I'm still an alcoholic. I said, no. I said, God set me free, and that's the power of the gospel. So being free from slavery to those things will greatly assist you, because you don't want to be with people or that are like, I need my nicotine. I was a slave to that, and now I said, yeah, it's bad. And then avoiding broken, damaged things unless you can get them really cheap or salvage for parts. So this is something you got to learn. You know, say a corn grinder. It's great, but it's got parts broken. You got to learn to identify it, and of course you'll make mistakes. But learning to inspect things like the cast iron cookware, like this old Griswold, it's really expensive, but it might have a crack in it. So being familiar with items. So where to find stuff? I started 10 years ago. I bought this book called Picker's Bible. It was by a guy that, you know, how to go find antiques. And these are some of the yard sales. That's some of the best, because those are people will, although yard sales now, people are getting smart, and sometimes you go to one and the prices are up there. But yard sales are great. You have to wade through a lot of stuff, though. A lot of baby clothes and new merchandise. But every once in a while, you find things. Estate sales, I don't do them as much, but these are options. Estate sales, you got to, you know, you have to really work them. You got to get there. Like, I know estate sales like in Chattanooga or Knoxville, people get there at like 8 o'clock the day before, the evening before, camp out. You know, but if you're going to get there, you got to be there early, and you got to be fast. It's over in 15 minutes. Yeah, especially if the prices are marked right. So there's a lot of pressure. But auctions, they can be auctions where it's nothing but junk. There can be auctions where there's lots of nice stuff. It just varies. You have to just, around here, I don't really hit them that much. I stick with flea markets, but I've tried everything. Flea markets are I think, areas where people naturally go to get rid of stuff, to look for things. When I moved here, I wanted garden tools. And I wanted good ones, old American ones, so that's what got me hunting. And then I'm like, well, where do these guys find this stuff? And that's what got me interested. I said, well, I like these tools. I want to go find them and for myself. So that's what got me started. Specialty shows like tractor shows. They got old farm equipment. Those can be really, especially up in Ohio and Indiana, where they got a lot of farms or barns and stuff. Antique shows. They have some that can be rather large. In Ohio, they got them like 2,000 dealers. You're going to find anything and everything. And so it's remarkable. I have old grinding stones for sharpening tools, hand-powered. Put it this way, how did they live in 1900? Everything in the home, you'll find it all out there. A lot of people use it for decoration, but they're also, the homeless are out there hunting it because they use it. So Facebook Marketplace is popular recently. You can find things like if you're looking for straw bales or a trailer or fireplaces, or wood stoves. I would not recommend looking now because everybody's looking. It's usually off season. But I did find some military ones recently. I bought some with a friend of mine. And yeah. Craigslist was the old school. It's still useful. Yeah, Facebook Marketplace. I don't like Facebook at all. Yeah, but Craigslist, people still use it. I have an account on Facebook. I use a pen name. I don't put any information there at all. I use it to list a few items and then to look for stuff. That's it. But I don't recommend, putting your pictures and your family information and where you're going to eat. And a lot of ministries are in there too. Do they know who Zuckerberg is? It's like, he is not a nice guy. Put it this way, he's on the enemy side. They're using it to harvest information for control. eBay, I sell stuff on eBay. I don't buy a lot. Every once in a while I do. I buy things like sandpaper, bulk, that would cost you for a flap disc $5 at the hardware store. Well, I actually buy it from a friend of mine. I get it for $2 a piece. But disposable supplies, there are people that wholesalers that will sell stuff. So, and I do buy a lot of stuff on eBay. Like, what was the latest one? Because I watch people talking about, oh, here's something useful to get. I'm trying to think of the latest one. It'll come to my mind here. But Facebook, or eBay, you can often compare. Well, this at Walmart cost $15, and I can get it off of eBay, shipped to my house for $12. Why not? Personal contacts. That's how I do it right now. Is people I know through contacts that say, "Oh, I want to get rid of this," or "My father died and he had a collection of this and that." So, personal information is really useful. Now, what can you find? This is a picture of a flea market in Morristown called First Monday. And you can see all kinds of interesting stuff here. Old gas cans, milk cans, lots of tools, hammers, pipe wrenches, horseshoes, pitchfork heads, post hole diggers. Yeah, this is kind of thing I'm like, wow, how much? And if it looks like one item or is cheap, then I don't ask anymore. I just start making a pile. Going through, okay, that gas can, I like metal gas cans, not these new plastic things. So I'll make a pile and then wheel and deal. And then the more you buy, you get a better deal. So this first Monday is actually coming up. It's the first Monday of every month. They started this in Depression. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they have a salvage place that sells salvage grocery there. It's not as good as it used to be. You used to go in and you would find a lot of organic stuff. You fill a banana box for $10. I walked out of there with $150 worth of food. Now it's getting scarce, because people are... Yeah, but you get, like I say, organic cereal. It used to be. And they'll sometimes get flats of bread in there, and you'll find some, organic stuff in there. I've never had a problem with it being bad. There's one time I bought organic coconut yogurt, but it was frozen, and then when it thawed out, the texture was like, ah. But other than that, but that's simultaneous with the flea market, and so people are selling stuff, and so it's a cultural thing. It's been going on since the Depression. They do a lot of animals, chickens, pigs, goats, animals. It's old hillbillies, animals, guns, knives, but anything that they can drag out of the barn. And it's a cultural phenomenon too. So here's some of the area ones. First Monday, Morristown Stock Barn. It's on Cumberland. If you're in downtown Morristown, it's Cumberland Avenue, and you go north and it turns into Buffalo Trail. But it's called the Stock Barn. Buffalo Trail. So if you just go into Morristown, get on Cumberland, it's right out of downtown, and then you go north, you can't miss it. You'll see cars lined up. It's kind of in a hole down on the side. And now I get there at 5 o'clock because I want parking spot number 1. And then I run up and down the hill if I find stuff. White Pine I-81, that one closes down in the winter, but that's a Saturday, Sunday market. That's if off of I-40, if you take exit 8 and go towards Morristown, it's along there. Flea Traders, that's in Sevierville, Highway 66. It's about, as you turn off the interstate, it's I-40, exit 407. It's about 5 miles down, past Smoky Mountain Knife Works. It's kind of touristy. So I've sold there and so forth. Jonesboro, this is the one I hit. I was there and did the Highway 11. It's a Sunday only market. It's a good one. There's a pretty good crowd there. So George is here. Is that the first time you've been there? Yeah. So it's, and then on the way home, I stop by Walmart, or I go in actually Johnson City Earth Fair. Like today they had organic potatoes for, on sale for $5 for a 5-pound bag. So I loaded up on those and sweet potatoes. And so I'll hit Earth Fair, go on into Johnson City. Tri-Cities, that's farther out. It's a big flea market, but a lot of junk. A lot of Chinese stuff. Tazewell, as you're going, if anybody's gone into Kentucky up Highway 25, it's called Giles or whatever. It's a true flea market. It's kind of flea bitten. But I've driven by it many times. I've never been there, but it's in the area. This one is Stone Drive. It was called the Mud Hole. It closed. The city closed it down. It's moved, but this one's really just old boys trading guns, so it's not really practical. But I would say First Monday and Jonesboro. And if you're close, the White Pine one it's good to know where they are, because you can say, if you have a bunch of stuff to sell, for example, it's a good place to go. So what types of business when stuff hits the fan? I'm thinking, what happens if you lose your job, or what things are people going to need to do when things collapse? Transportation. If you can't drive, you see in third world countries, people need to be taken to the hospital. They need to be taken shopping. So if you have minivan, buses, or tricycles, this is what they use in the Philippines and Africa. Most people don't have cars. So if you have a transportation service that you can move people or goods, that's valuable. I know a guy that's actually making his own fuel. He runs a minivan off of 85% ethanol. And so he's working on alternative fuel production. So he'll be able to run even if there's no gas in the gas stations. That will be very valuable. Security services, when things break down, there might be roving mobs, people trying to loot. So unfortunately, we live in the world of sin. The only way to stop those is with force. So you can either hire it or do it yourself. A lot of people don't realize, if you're 70 hours, Ellen White had security when she traveled. When she traveled out into Colorado on the wagon trains, believe me, they had security. So it's not inappropriate. So you can either do it yourself, or but security services, people that have law enforcement or military background are certainly equipped for that. Here's a big one: alternative medical services. A home-based clinic or a first aid station. It's going to be priceless. If you can help people that are sick, patch them up or give them natural remedies, believe me, it will be priceless. Alternative education, homeschooling, church schools, trade schools, tutoring services. The modern educational system is gone. It's toast. It's worthless. As I was telling them earlier, it's enemy territory. So at this point, the practical trades, share your skills with the young people and tutor them, mentor them. Financial services, pawn shops, capital investment, coin jewelry shops. You got this gold or silver. How do you turn it into goods? Well, you can do straight barter, or, people still have faith in fiat currency. But today, if you had a gold piece and you wanted cash, you go to a coin shop, right? Now, they will give you, I know a guy it deals in a lot. They give 90 to 92% of melt value. Okay, that's what they'll pay. And so if you want to try to get more, you can try selling on eBay or try to sell it in the flea market. If you want to convert coins into, at this point, I would not convert your coins into cash, because the demand for silver and gold is like, you can't get your hands on it now. All the banks are buying it. Why? Because they know it's coming. All this paper, it's like in Zimbabwe, $1 million bill, right? And I've been to Zimbabwe. I studied how they did things. They were not starving to death. It wasn't like Venezuela. There were people out there, they weren't skinny rails. It wasn't Ethiopia. They were exercising and so forth, but high unemployment. Yeah. my recommendation is if you have property or have a place that people would stay, have a plan how to deal with them and how to screen them. I don't have much, but I have a little teeny house. It's not big. A couple people could live there. I have a place that's cleared that if people showed up and they weren't hostile, if they come up trying to loot, we'll deal with that. But if they're really earnest charity case or friends or something like that, I can say there's a clear spot. Here's a tent. Okay, here's a shovel. You're going to have to dig a latrine. You can use this bucket. And if they start complaining, I say, well, you can go to FEMA. An honest person, I mean, I learned this when I joined the church. The pastor taught me how to detect a scammer versus a needy person. About 90% of people are scammers. But an earnest person is not going to complain if you say, well, do you have some food? Sure, I'll get you some food. Let's go to the store and I'll buy you some. Oh, no, I just want the money. Goodbye. But if they're really hungry, are they going to complain if you say, well, I'm strict on my diet. I don't want to buy you a bunch of, junk food. So I'm going to buy you some whole wheat bread, a jar of peanut butter with oil on the top, and some bananas. If you're hungry, are you going to complain? No. Same idea. So, okay, you can come here, but here's the work plan. Here are the rules. And it's like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. If there's any complaining, here's a little charity to get down the road, but. So that's why having a plan where you sit down and say, this is what's going to happen here. We work by the sweat of our brow, so. If you're in that position, if you have skills, like I know how to grow food, or I know how to weld, or I know how to this, it's probably going to make yourself a lot more welcome. Mechanical services, being able to fix things, cars, trucks, motorcycles, bicycles, and having the tools to go with that. I used to ride a bike a lot. I still kept my tools. But some kind of thing that's useful, repair, manufacturing, clothes, footwear. I mean, we all buy our shoes made in China, right? But how about a cobbler? Or making shoes from hide, animal hide, moccasin things. If you can do that, tools, gunsmithing, machinist, any kind of that talent will be valuable because stuff is going to break. How are you going to get parts? Fabricate them. And then local food production, that's big. And so these are just examples. Me personally, I like the tools. I like to sharpen them. So my backup business is being able to sharpen stuff by hand without power. I use power tools now, but what if it all goes down? So I collect files, and I have a beautiful grinding stone, hand-powered, there's no chips, that I can do stuff like that. So that's one I'm going to work on, and all the files to do saws and, yeah. Uh-huh.
That's why if you take a gun to a gunsmith, say when it's not on the books, it's not on the books.
Gets registered.
Ooh. It's in his book. He's an actual gunsmith.
If he's a licensed, yeah.
And the thing is, if you're not licensed, you take the currency of the realm.
That's a good one where you have some silver coins in your pocket.
Well, the thing that is trading.
Yeah. So I hear
then there's no money change.
Yeah. And no records kept. Especially firearms is a touchy one. I mean, it's a God-given right, but they want people disarmed because you can control them. So being wise how to maneuver around there. That's why right now, that's why flea markets are popular, because it's still legal to private say, well, Cat, you have this thing and I want an old revolver. No problem. Now people say, well, I'll go to gun show. The thing about gun shows is they take lots of pictures, so I don't go to one. Yeah.
He's done a picture by the time you get out already knows that you are from biometrics.
And they troll around flea markets too. So you may want to avoid all that stuff and deal with friends. That's why it's good to know people. Where do you sell your stuff? Well, you can sell yard sale, flea markets. I've done very well selling yard sales or group yard sale with 2 or 3 people. We advertise it on Facebook and the local paper. Believe me, there will be pickers that will come hit that thing hard. So along the roadside, specialty shows, antique shows, car shows, eBay. I sell some things on eBay, not a lot, but certain things like axes that are higher quality with names on them, older ones that I restore. I try to keep the income level low. I'll tell you the number. Less than 15,000. They're not going to pay attention. They're looking for people rolling 50,000, and there are people. I know people that turn 200,000 on eBay. But then you have to file, get an accountant, and all that. And I'm like, I don't want to go to that level. So if you just do a little bit here and there, you're kind of under the radar. Okay. Now I anticipate a day will come when that will get totally regulated. So I've used it for, it's just one avenue. It's not the sole thing. Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, Let Go. There are other things besides just Facebook. 5 miles. People will list things. Craigslist is the kind of the original one, and it's still active. It's still worthwhile. Local networks, okay. Meetup areas. I know people that will meet up all the time, like on Facebook. I never meet at my house, or exceptionally rare. But I will meet up out at a I-81, exit 36 Baileyton, Travel America truck stop, Walmart parking lot, places like that where, it's in, and I meet up at, I've done a couple meetups in the evening, and I would say avoid it if you can. Because I have had no problem, and I haven't heard of people, but I think it will come to a point where people will use that to, heist you, carjack, or especially valuable stuff. So I think in the future, think about, well, if you're going to do a meetup, you might want to have somebody with you. I do them solo right now, but
There's been a few cases where guns have been hijacked. Mainly just grabbing loans.
snatching.
Yeah, they're looking at it and they got their vehicle standing close by, and it's like in the vehicle and they're gone.
Yeah.
Walmart. Walmart was stealing your house.
Yeah.
Cover way.
Another one a friend of mine had is he wanted to buy a trailer or something, and he met these people at a place, and they said, well, follow us. And they followed him into this place, and he pulled up a road, and he got there, and as he started to pull in, he saw a car with somebody sitting in it, and he thought, I pull in, and they're going to pinch me off. And he immediately saw that, stopped, backed up, and hightailed it out of there. Later, he used to do undercover work. And so he talked to the sheriff, and the sheriff said, you made it out of there? This is notorious. This is in Virginia, not too far away. So most people that they're straight up will come out, you'll see the car, okay, I'm in an old Silverado or whatever, broad daylight, and everything's fine. But if you get a sense, listen, like filling up a gas, if I go in, I don't fill up at night unless I travel a lot, but if you see men loitering or hanging around, don't stop. And the whole awareness thing, when you're filling up, are you looking around? Because there are people that will sit on the bay next to it, ready to do a carjack, and they like to prey on women because they're just like, they're easily overrun, but they're, sitting on the cell phone, they're driving a $35,000 car. I've seen them. They get out, they leave the keys there or something, and they're like yakking away or whatever. I told a couple, I said, ma'am, do you realize? I said, you should close your door and keep your keys here. And look around, I said, I'd walk up and just pow. She's gone, jump in, and I'm off with the car and the cell phone and the whole thing.
I've seen that rest area too, late at night. Stop to make a pit stop.
Yeah.
You see people loitering.
Oh, definitely. When I would go into Ohio, outside of Cincinnati, or down in Kentucky, that first rest stop, there would be people, scammers going around. The woman with the baby type of all this. Think about your house too. Distressed woman outside at night. Never, ever open the door. But yeah, rest stops are notorious for it, especially around urban areas. Okay. This is, a layout of stuff I had. This is the one in North Carolina. But, pitchforks, garden tools, hand tools, files. And this kind of stuff, if you lay this out, people, you get a lot of attention. So I've been doing this for 10 years. Now let's talk about trade zones under stress when things are not, we're still in a little bit of civility here, but what happens when things get worse? I would suggest establishing discrete areas where meetups can be arranged. Maybe church parking lot, early in the morning, and you can message people and people that you know, or groups, like I say, you're getting familiar with people and say, okay, we can meet up and barter change for a short period of time. You might even have to do it undercover. But thinking about local areas where people will come together and can congregate and trade whatever, vegetables or services or whatever. Have a means of communicating so items can be identified in advance, text, email, telegram, MeWe, shortwave, CB, some communications, how to have a network there. So you can have it a plan, okay, Wednesdays early, before dark or before light, we're going to meet up at this place. So having meetup zones, church parking lots or behind a church where it's not easily visible. Those are just ideas. Set times to meet, preferably early and out of open view. Bring your trade items in boxes or containers that can be quickly unloaded and reloaded, like banana boxes. So say you don't want to be hanging out, you come in, boom, here's my produce, boom, or here's my supplies. You come up, you go through it, you do your stuff, and then. So I'm talking about austere conditions, things when things are not so friendly. Do your trading quickly, move on. Prepare for alternative modes of transportation. Motorcycles. You look at third world countries. Motorcycles, I've seen a whole family on a motorcycle. And baskets and packs and bicycles with, little trailers on the back. Walking. I mean, think about trade days. They do reenactments, but there are people that literally walk days to go trade. So, horseback, foot, meet with known entities and come with armed support. Right now, things are relatively calm, but when things break down and people can't get things, they can't go to Walmart and get the stuff, then there's areas where there's supplies like truck stops or Walmart warehouses are going to become war zones. Or put it this way, groups like gangs are going to commandeer and take over. Okay, the areas where there's fuel and resources, and that's where it's going to be nasty. Prostitution, drugs. And so you don't really want to have to deal in those areas if you can. Now here's the interesting thing. Sarajevo, that's a real world example. What if you have a family member and you're doing okay, but they get sick and you need antibiotics and you don't have them? Guess what? They had to go through some really hostile areas because there was a area with a gang leader or whatever that dealt with it. And this guy, Selko is his name, told a story. And it's hair-raising. They had to deal with snipers. They had to go through, they had to deal with people all armed. And they managed to get the antibiotics, but it was not a, it was a hair-raising ordeal. Yeah. My preference is real life testimonies of people that have gone through it. Now, I give example of Zimbabwe because I was there just before COVID. And you can go there, there's all, because told them, take me to the market. Now, I felt comfortable. Now, it's a big city. There, at first, I was a little nervous because I said, there's no law enforcement. I said, where's the police? Oh, they're so corrupt, they got fired. And we're in a van, and we're picking up everybody to host meetings, right? But we're driving around at night, and we're pulling into areas, and I'm like, there's lots of people. And I'm like, in the United States, it was like, how would you like to be in downtown Atlanta or Memphis? And I'm like, you wouldn't be there. But so at first, I'm like, I'm on edge. But I realized I kind of relaxed. I said, I'm not in the United States. Okay, there's not this cultural thing that, you know. So even though I was the 2-meter plus white dude, they didn't think it wasn't an issue. And so after a couple nights, I relaxed. But they have a way of doing things. So we went into the produce market to buy stuff, and I had guys with me. None of us were armed. It really wasn't necessary, but everybody knew, hey, I'm not here wandering around aimlessly. And so we looked for stuff. We were setting up a print shop, so we had to go to office supply. You don't buy anything new there. Everything's used, but there were plenty of food. It's like a flea market. I mean, they don't get new stuff there. You don't buy new computers. Everything's used, recycled, left over. But nobody was starving to death. So, and Zimbabwe is in a collapsed economy. That's what socialism does. And so their fiat currency is worthless. But they managed to get by. So I'm like, okay. And I saw opportunities. If I lived there, I told them, if I lived here, this is what I would do. I looked around and I didn't see any quality knives. And I'm looking around and I see junk cars and trucks and there's car springs in them. I'm like, not in the Philippines. You can't find car springs. Why? Because they take them, it's high quality steel, and they make all knives from this big to machetes. Forge them. And I'm like, I told them, I said, because we went to one market and these old bush guys had axes. I'm like, where do those guys make those axes? Oh, out in the bush. And I'm like, okay. And I told them, if I lived here, this is what I do. I get the source of the car springs, and I go out to the bush, and I get those old bush guys to teach me how to forge, and I would get the setup, and I'd make knives. I said, you could go into the city and sell them to the people, the ladies with the kitchen knives and all that. I said, you'd have a boom market. This one guy, his eyes got all excited and said, go for it. I said, in the Philippines, it was everywhere you go, I would buy machetes. Every time I go, they loved me because I would buy machetes because they were cheap. But yeah, just find something that people need. And so, yeah, in Zimbabwe, I think if I had to stay there, I could survive, no problem. What I'll kind of wrap up here with is strategies for trading, thinking about things that are useful, and then I'll tell you a couple examples of real-world scenarios that have happened in our lifetime. So strategies for trading, when I started, because what will happen when societies or systems collapse is the traditional places that people go, might break down because there's no supplies. I think this is going to happen in this country. There will be no more Walmart. Okay? So where are people going to get stuff? It's going to get real local.
What about all the Walmart employees? What's going to happen to them?
They're going to...
Millions of them, aren't there?
There are.
Millions of all sorts of other.
Yes. So people that are not thinking about this, that are oblivious in the artificial world, are going to be in real trouble, especially the cities. Put it this way, Ellen White talks about her pen could not describe the scenes of chaos. Yes. And you can see this, that it's already beginning to break down like Philadelphia. You see these wanton acts of brazen violence, broad daylight. It's just barbaric, totally what you call feral. Folks, it's coming. People are going to go feral. And so obviously being away from that, because those places will become just total predators. Who will take over? Gangs. They're already organized. So the criminal element will take over. If you want to know what they're like, just look at some documentaries on cartels. I'm not a fan of movies, but there is a movie, if you want to get your, it's called Sicario. It's horrible. It's nasty. I wouldn't recommend it, but it will give you a picture about how cartels work. They're purely satanic. And people under satanic control will brutalize and victimize people in ways you can't think of. And if you don't think this is biblical, I mean, the Syrians are pretty brutal too. What they do, just look at contemporary history. What happened in Ukraine during the Stalinist purges? Okay, what happened when the Russians drove the Germans back into Germany? Believe me, Russians don't like Germans. Because Germans did horrible things to Russia. And then Stalingrad and that siege, a million people died there. Okay, and then when the Russians pushed them back, what they did to the German people in those villages, the Mongols. Not nice. Just one story. It's interesting. I believe that God gave us a right to defend ourselves. I'm not looking for trouble, but if somebody would go and break into my house and victimize my wife, I would go feral on that person. Now, the question is, my wife says, I don't want a gun in this house. And I'm like, okay, so what am I going to do? Take them on with my bare hands? There is something that it's interesting, rose out of World War II. Jewish people were victimized. They didn't have arms, and they were brutalized by brown shirts that went around harassing and intimidating. And it wasn't nice what they did. And so there were some of those people that developed a system of self-defense using your hands. It's called Krav Maga. It is not a sport. Yeah, Maga. It's not a sport. It's not a cage thing. It's not a martial art. So it's no connection to religious or Eastern mysticism. It's purely practical. They developed the means how to defend themselves from dogs. And the guy that developed it, his family, they were boxer types, but they developed techniques to use your hands to stop predators with combination of strikes and so forth. I myself grew up, I'd never fought. I kind of in high school a couple times, but I never had any skill. I started doing this training a year ago. It's helped me for two things. Physical conditioning. I'm in better shape than I've been in for years. And that's important to anybody. Just, being able to do calisthenics, push-ups, burpees, jumping jacks. So that's part of it. And then the other part is just, hey, I don't want any trouble. I don't want any trouble. So does it look like I'm an aggressive predator? No. But from this position, if somebody, the first object is to get away, escape. And then use, skills of, how to de-escalate, how to recognize the trouble coming, and then how to get away and get avoided. That's the first objective, because when you get into an altercation, you can get hurt or killed. So that's learning those skills. I said, hey, that's practical. But the last resort is if you get caught in a corner or there's an innocent victim, then if you have to do something, you can bring into what they call a tool set. So it is a practical thing. My wife disagrees with it. She thinks it's military training. I said, no, it's self-defense. So that's one option. So that was developed in World War II for Jewish people. And then later it became adopted into, when Israel set up, into their defense forces. Soldiers are trained killers. I'm not advocating to become a trained killer, but soldiers do have to defend themselves, a lot. So it's useful for them as well, but it's also useful for ordinary people. And a friend of mine convinced me to do it. He said, because this way, if I can just pop somebody in the nose or in the throat and they go, "Ah," and I can get away, then they're still alive and maybe they can, hear the gospel and no longer become predator criminals. So I would rather just say injure somebody or stop a fight and get away than displaying a firearm, and then because that's more serious consequences. So, but austere things like examples in Sarajevo. There's a lot of good stories about a guy that was 17-year-old when that whole thing collapsed, but they had no power, no water, no services. We're talking an entire city. And then they had snipers there, so if you went out to get something, and they sat up there and they would shoot women and kids, anybody, trying to get basics like water. And you all know water is essential. So they would have to sneak out at night, and it was just horrible. But people survived it. And it's like, so it'd be better if you could avoid the city and avoid those things. So I look at it as, I think God has given us counsel, the wisdom to get out in the country, network with people. Things are going to be tough, but you're not going to deal with that level of barbarism, or criminal mobs and gangs. Now, they might start coming out into the country, but there are at least opportunities to meet them at the road. I'll tell you two stories that I know, because I know people in South Africa. I was nervous to go to South Africa because you can't carry a firearm. I had that knife, but I had to stay in Johannesburg for 4 days. And it's like you're in a prison. Everybody's house has high walls with concertina wire, and a lot of it's electrified. Private security. And the guy I stayed with, he was a smart guy. He says, well, what do you think of this place? And I said, would you really want me to speak? And he said, yeah. I said, well, in the United States, where I live, I said, it's just like a prison. Everybody's walls. We don't have walls. And I said, we don't have private security. Everybody has a gun, most houses do. But I said, the only place in the U.S. like this are like gated communities and, prisons or gated communities outside of New York City. And I said, I've been around them, and I said, those are not places, where you have to, live almost in these gates and all this stuff. And I said, that to me is kind of constrictive. That's not real freedom. But what happened in the police are almost incompetent, so is the military. So a year and a half ago, they had the riots. You remember the mobs started ransacking warehouses. I mean, just hundreds of people show up and going after whatever it was, TVs and food or whatever, and they just pillaged and pillaged Johannesburg, and then the other city was Durban on the coast. And they kept going, and it went on for a week. And then they finally ran out of stuff. They burned up everything, destroyed everything. And finally they said, well, where can we go next? And they look at the neighborhoods and they said, well, there's people here, maybe not wealthy, but people that have decent houses and all this. We're going to go into those neighborhoods. So guess what happened? The people who lived in those neighborhoods, which were mixed, they were Afrikaners, which is the minority white. There were Indians from the country India, which are actually despised by some people. And there were local South Africans and then immigrants. There's a lot of tension there between tribes. They're all the same skin color, but I noticed they don't like the people from Nairobi. They hate them. So there's a lot of tension. But at any rate, this neighborhood, everybody in the neighborhood said, forget our differences. We're going to get together and stop this thing. So they got whatever they could, a shotgun, an AK-47, whatever. Very difficult to have firearms, not impossible, but they band together. Some guys had law enforcement and military or whatever. They said, we're going to set up checkpoints and nobody comes in. And so, except if you live here. So the mob shows up, they start coming up, they pop a couple rounds, so they didn't even have to shoot anybody. Mob turned around and left. That's what stopped them. The armed neighborhood. And that happened. Now, I have people I know that left Johannesburg, live out in the country. The one guy that lives there would like to get a firearm. It takes him a year, and just outrageous amount of regulations and all this stuff. And I said, well, go ahead and try. It doesn't hurt. But, it's here, it's still, in certain, depends on where you live, but that's a reality you have to think about, is if you have to go into those areas, you're going to, like I say, mobs or gangs and checkpoints, and you're going to have to, it's like going into Mexico. Would any of you want to go into Mexico now? Joe, you say, well, they got that Adventist school down there in Montmorelos or whatever. We need you down here to help. Would you drive down there?
I wouldn't drive.
Probably not. I used to know people that would drive from Texas all the way into
Well, there are people that take mission trips down there all the time.
Walk across the border
They
a couple
know
times.
they have multiple contacts everywhere. It helps. No, I can tell you having grown up in Brazil. When I went back to the town I was growing up in, I said, come with us, but don't go by yourself. All right.
That's what helped me in South Africa and Zimbabwe is I had people and contacts, and they said, don't worry. And I had the trust in God, and God uses people, but they knew the territory. They were native. That's different. But yeah, wandering around there. But yeah, especially with the cartels right now, the problem is those elements they're here.
Oh, yeah.
They're yes, you see them in the flea market. I'm not saying they're cartel elements, but those people, they don't speak hardly any English. There's busloads of them at Walmart right now. Busloads. Because when they come in, there's like 50 guys all speaking Spanish, and they run through the market, and it's like, whoa! It's all this commotion. I'm like, what's going on? Well, they've showed up with 2 busloads, all men. Maybe the oldest is maybe 50 or so. Military age men. They're probably working the fields out there. But they show up at Walmart here in Greenville, and it's clear that they're, it's like they're in a market in Mexico. They're like buzzing around, and it's like. So they're here. They're coming in increasing numbers, and so that's a whole cultural thing. They're settling in Hamlin County, in particular, in Morristown, but that's going to be an area to, be nice if you're bilingual. And that's another skill. Learn Spanish, because if the ones that show up and you start seeing some tattoos on the neck, you should be full alert. Okay? And if you can understand Spanish, or somebody that speaks Spanish, you can probably, you can hear them if they're planning to do something. So those are things to think about, because I think that's where it's going to go. I think God has given us provision to make, to be prepared. And the situational awareness, I would say the one argument that I learned from firearms training was learning to be more aware of my environment, not paranoid. And I could leave this thing away, I could leave it at home, but it's like being aware to see, hey, something's not right here. And listening and being able to read people and get a sense of people. Because when these 2 sisters walked up, I'm like, are they dangerous? No, I think they're nice. Right? This is why it's interesting. You get out of your narrow focus of science, like hard chemistry, and you get into mind science, or danger, like Ellen White says, mind cure, which is mind control, which is bad because it's everywhere. So you don't want that, but understanding people, body language, like, how do I know? My fear was somebody would come up and like this, and kind of a threatening gesture, and then all of a sudden, the haymaker. What are the signals? With training, professionals, like I say, boxers, will read body signals. When they punch, they don't cock like this, telegraph, they go boom. So I'm like, body movement and gestures and facial things, all of that stuff. You can even watch video on FBI interrogators how to detect people are lying. You know, it's just like facial things and lip and eye and all that. So it's like those are useful skills because it's like, and that's why, like I say, the barter trade, getting out there, interacting with people, and you can feel there are people that are opportunists. And I'm like, okay, you deal with them nicely now, but it's like when trouble comes, I'm like, ooh. Versus, hey, I know this guy, I know Kat, I know George. Yeah, devices, you know, the televisions and all of that. But anyway, any questions, comments on barter trade, or like to get into it? Like I say, a week from tomorrow, first Monday. I don't know where you folks live, but Greenville, Morristown. Yeah, it's not that far. It starts. I get there at 5. I mean, because believe it or not, 90% of the deals are before sunlight. Now, if you show up at 9 o'clock, that's fine. There's still stuff to buy. You can still check it out. But yeah, it's still reasonable. I'm looking to buy for resale. So I'm looking for the axe for $5 or $10 that I clean up and sharpen and sell for 20. But if you get there at 9 o'clock, you know, you're going to have to buy the $20 one. Is that still a good deal? Yeah. Compared to the piece of junk at Walmart, you know, it's a very fair value. But it's just like, you know, if you want the real bargains, and I look at it as too. I walk the flea market like 50 times up and down. I'm like, that's my morning exercise. So. But it's a cultural thing, and I'm like I say, it's also an opportunity to interact with people. And you get a vibe on some people. You get some people like, you know, bad weather, a store. Usually people, only the hardcores will show up. But I think when things get really bad, if you need food, I mean, you're going to show up rain or shine. And
That's coming.
yes. That's where I see the challenge is getting people to realize that reality is coming to us. Things are going to get food shortages. I mean, because of all of these supply lines, trucking, fuel, infrastructures being destroyed.
All the places that grow food have been under pressure, either drought or something, so, or war or whatever. So even the places that grow it, and then they don't have the fertilizer. I mean, it doesn't get to multiple places.
Oh, just look at last week. The barges in Mississippi,
They're dry.
they can't move the piles of beans. And I'm like, guess what, folks? I like beans, but they're going to go like this. So might not be a bad idea to fill a couple buckets with beans because they're sitting rotting and they sit there and they get mold. You're talking moldy peanuts, aflatoxin. So, yeah, and why is the Mississippi going dry? Geoengineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, they worked on the weather because they're trying to collapse society and bring it. So it's like, are people?
Populate the earth.
Yes. Now, I thank God that no, Michael's going to stand up here soon enough and deliver his people, but there's no promise that we're going to be secretly taken out of the picture. No. But I think in God's wisdom, He's like given us sufficient counsel, like, you know, get to know your neighbors, get out of the city, get in the country and learn something practical. So barter trade is part of it. I got a lot of customers, blacksmiths, guys that do horseshoeing, woodworkers. They are people just hobbyists or whatever, but, you know, they're coming looking for stuff where you can find it. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.